Today's video is brought to you by my amazing patrons on Patreon. Priority deck requests and extended discussions are just some of the many perks you get for being a patron. Consider supporting the channel today. Welcome back to today's build. Whether you're just looking for upgrades or have no idea how to build this deck, I'll be your guide to this wonderful game we all love. Let's get started. Today's deck is often very late, despite being a wizard. His name is Gandalf, and this is the secret sauce. Gandalf gives the instants and sorceries we cast on enemy turns an extra cast, much like Flashback. Except, Gandalf does this on Suspend, which we've discussed in depth before with some Doctor Who builds. Just like the 10th Doctor, who also adds a fixed 3 time counters to his spells, we're rewarded more for suspending spells with higher mana values. But there's a catch. Unlike the 10th Doctor, who can time travel to immediately pull those spells off Suspend, Gandalf is stuck waiting those counters off, which, much like the 11th Doctor, is also more efficient when you suspend as many spells as possible all at once. But suspending multiple spells a turn really burns through the number of cards in hand quickly, which means if we suspend wide like this, we'll need a lot of support to refill our cards in hand quickly. Now, all that being said, casting spells with time instead of mana is a truly awful way to cast your spells. A turn 4 Gandalf wouldn't suspend their first spell or spells until turn 5, removing a time counter on each turn until turn 8 when they'll be recast, which gives us a helpful clue as to just how tall we're actually able to suspend before taking advantage of alternate casting costs. But actually, a lot of games may not last much longer than that 8th turn, if you even survive that long. This is a spells deck, not a creature deck. You might not have enough blockers, which means it's very likely that the only spells we get to see resolve from Suspend naturally are the spells we cast in our first turn or two of controlling Gandalf. And if Gandalf is removed before we can suspend something, even if we hit our land drops and recast Gandalf 2 turns later, we will never have enough time left in the game to see those spells resolve. Said again, if Gandalf is removed, nearly everything in these lists stops working. This is a very fragile, load-bearing commander if you build totally around that suspension. I think it's probably going to be a lot better for us if we de-emphasize the role that Suspend plays in the deck and instead just treat it as an alternative to giving some spells flashback. The first way we can correct for this is to pack enough ramp to make sure that we get a turn 3 Gandalf rather than a turn 4 Gandalf. Because instants can be cast on enemy turns without additional support, but sorceries can't, we'll have more flexibility in the deck if we place a heavier emphasis on instants instead of setting up our sorceries. Those instants also need to be able to actually do something if they do end up resolving off Suspend, so we'll keep an eye out for modal spells and try to reject pure counter. Most of the Suspend counter tricks are getting cut. These cards absolutely make Gandalf's ability more usable, but that is also the only thing they are doing. Because they only work when we're already popping off and doing the thing, but don't do anything besides that, and don't do enough to pull us over the finish line, these behave a lot like win more cards. Any time travel effects we include should be able to serve other functions besides just time travel. So we'll be running these cards in their place. Discounting instants and sorceries is not something we have time to be doing, and not something we actually need to do in order to be successful. Like I said earlier, the biggest thing you can do to get time on your side is to just ramp normally in a way that can cast Gandalf earlier, and these effects don't do that. Moreover, cost reducers get the most benefits when we're going wide with spell casts, which we'll certainly try to do when we can, but remember, that's a great way to burn through cards in your hand faster. We're probably going to be better off going tall on our suspended spells rather than wide, which also benefits more from hard ramp. We'll swap them out for these instead to be able to hold off enemy attacks, while we spin the Spellslinger wheel. Emphasizing sorceries means that we need to give those spells flash to work with our commander, but that takes up a lot of card slots to be able to do reliably and is absolutely not worth the setup cost. Instead, we'll be running these cards to double spell on enemy turns and capitalize on our high volume instants in the deck, which can also be played during our upkeep if that's when Frantic Search comes off suspend.
So what do our lands look like?
Other than some basic lands, and the cheaper dual lands to fix our colors, the 2 Horizon lands we can run to draw cards will serve us well here, as will Emergence Zone as our one way to enable sorceries at flash speed. After that, I'm running the Scry and Surveil land, since more of our strategy relies on card selection.
So what's our timeline?
On our early turns, our priority is ramp to set up an earlier Gandalf, so make sure you keep an opening hand that can facilitate this. With the turn 3 Gandalf, we'll fire up turn 4 and unleash any of these cards to cram as many spells onto the suspend track as we can early on, in case we only get this one chance to do so. Next, we'll refill our hand while we wait for those time counters to tick down, and buy time for it with these interaction spells that will slow down our opponents after removing their boards. To dig for our win conditions, we'll be running a lot of spells that let us churn through the cards in our deck, and remark on the flavor of including a confounding riddle in a Gandalf. What we're looking for actually could be a couple of different lines. First, Approach of the Second Sun with Reprieve or Remand, to put it back in our hand, can win on the same turn with enough mana, which we could also end up making with Fury Storm while controlling a Stormkiln Artist, which would also then be big enough to one-shot a player if it connected. Or, of course, we could just knock out opponents directly with Rao and Fury Storm instead. Just make the Fury Storm copy target the original Fury Storm. This deck's greatest strength is how interactive it is. Because we're not relying exclusively on Gandalf or the time counters to carry us through the game, we have enough resiliency that we're not just dead the second things go wrong. If you go look for gameplay videos of decks with this Gandalf, you'll see just how often they fail to actually do the thing and how frequently things go poorly for them. And that weakness drives a lot of the decisions we've made here. But even then, our best shot at winning is when opponents leave us alone, so you better be good at politics. If your playgroup is pretty heavy on interaction or really fast aggressive decks, then those time counters are usually going to make Gandalf late to the party. That said, a lot of higher end pieces that were left out because I don't think what they cost monetarily is worth what they're adding to the utility of the deck, I've left them in the Considering tab in Decklist if you really wanted to upgrade this even further. A very special thanks to all my amazing patrons. When I started this channel, I wanted to talk about deck building decisions with my videos, but in practice what ends up happening is that I talk for 30 minutes about all the nuance of a deck, which is longer than I'm comfortable with posting to YouTube. Here, patrons can request priority deck techs, access extended discussions on their favorite decks, in-depth guides on complex game actions, and more.
So if you enjoyed this content, consider becoming a patron today. One of the things my patrons have made possible is a special series of deck techs that I'm really excited to show off to you guys. When I finally get them all uploaded, I'll be giving away a special collection of altars and tokens that I've made, corresponding to each deck on the channel. For example, for the Merkle Lord of Bones deck, the prize is a set of double-faced altars of the most prominent cards in the deck, whose backsides are set in the constellation frame with updated text to show that they're acting as enchantments now. For every 1,000 views on each video, I'll increase the prize pool for that deck. All you have to do to be eligible to win is be subscribed to the channel.
Consider supporting the channel today. If you like this video, here are some of the decks I'm working on next, so if you like what you see, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any, and check out the playlist in the top left for more. Thanks for watching!